people that are my age around. A lot of times I'm speaking to rooms where the average age of people are much older than me, and so I was excited to come and speak to the group, and I know most of the people in this half of the room, and Carly, I guess you're going to be over here, so I'll make sure to turn and include you as well, but mostly, I wanted to come here and talk about, my experience as a young person getting involved in politics so young, and to tell you all that you can do the same. And especially with my experience, my parents never went to college. My parents were in a hunting ranch in South Dakota, south of here in Hot Springs, and so for me, my mom didn't even go to college, my dad, they're not lawyers, and so going through this entire experience and getting involved in politics wasn't because my parents were involved, which is often the case in states like South Dakota, or family ties. It was because of something that happened to me when I was young. And so my mom was a employee of the VA down in Hot Springs, and then my dad is a disabled Vietnam veteran. And when I was in 7th grade was when the closure of the VA hospital down there and that whole situation started happening. And for those of you who don't know, because you might not even remember this, at that point, the news stories on Fox News wasn't about the border, it wasn't about the economy, it was about veterans dying trying to get care. That was the headlines. The facility in Hot Springs was a 5-star facility, and it was one of the best in the country. It was actually serving veterans properly, and the Obama administration, for whatever reason, had it on a slate to be closed. So it didn't make any sense for our community, first of all, but as a 7th grader, I realized that if the place where my mom worked and the place where my dad got his health care was going to go away, most of the town was also going to go away. All my friends were going to move away because their parents were going to lose their jobs. And I couldn't understand why the flick of a pen in Washington, D.C. could basically end the entire town and the life that I knew. And so I wrote a letter as a 7th grader that I sent to the White House and all these different officials, and I got a response back. So that letter had to go through some important people's hands, but what was frustrating was once I got that letter back, I realized that it was just kind of a thanks for your comments letter, and it didn't really do anything. And so I was very frustrated as a kid that I was protesting and helping with this movement, and nothing was getting done. It was for the people who have fought for our freedoms. And so I realized that from that time forward that I didn't want to just be writing letters to elected officials or people, bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. that weren't doing anything for us, that I wanted to have a seat at the table and have our community be heard, because we were voiceless at that point. And so from that moment on, I paged when I was a high schooler, both as a junior and a senior, so I got to be in the House and the Senate. And then my freshman year of college, to the angst of many of my professors in college, I actually ended up getting an internship working in the Secretary of State's office, which was an incredible experience because I got to work validating petition signatures. So I understand what that process looks like when they do a statistical validation of petitions. It was during IM 23 or 26 at the time that was being protested, so I got to see what it looks like when there's some kind of hot and heavy issues going on at the state capitol building. When I was 19 years old, all of the people that were there that were interning, all of them were juniors and seniors, and I was a freshman. So you don't have to necessarily wait, and a lot of times professors or people that are older will say, oh, you're too young, you can't get involved. You can, and most of the time in my life, when someone told me no, it made me want to do it even more. And so the summer after that, I actually spent time in Virginia working for a state legislator out there because I wanted to get an experience in a different state that had more what they call a professional legislature, or one that operates for longer time than we do, where they have professional staff members that actually serve the members of the legislature. And the way that I got that internship was by sending a cold email. And for whatever reason, this man answered my email and said, sure, we'll hire you, and gave me a chance, even though I was a freshman at the University of South Dakota, middle of nowhere. They didn't know me, I didn't know them. And 4 years later, that man became the Attorney General of Virginia. And no one could have ever predicted that, and God has a funny way of making things work out. But you never know what sending that cold email or making that cold phone call or submitting a resume, even if there isn't a job opening. And I'll tell a little bit about now the job that I have as about to be a lawyer, because of sending, again, a cold email and a cold message and just saying, give me a chance. So if you want to get involved, people aren't necessarily going to be knocking on your door and saying, hey, come and help. I mean, they might, But most of the time, if you want to get involved, sometimes you have to create your own opportunities, and sometimes it's hard. People will tell you no, you'll get rejected. I, even applying to college, could have wallpapered my bathroom with the number of rejection letters that I received. But that no just should be another, kind of chip on your shoulder to keep going and keep pushing. If you have a dream and a passion and you want to do something for your community and your country, you should get involved now. Even the founding fathers, they were 19, 20, 21, 22, 27. I think the oldest one was like Alexander Hamilton, and he was 33 potentially, or something like that. But they were all under the age of 45, right? And so this is not something that you have to wait to get involved. And so I went on from, undergrad, I interned for a few people in the state of South Dakota, and then my senior year of college, I got the life-changing opportunity to be a White House intern in the Trump administration. And that's kind of the turning point in my story. I like to say that because I also am involved in Turning Point USA as well, and Charlie Kirk and that kind of crew are good friends of mine. But working in the White House during 2020, an election day, a Supreme Court nomination, COVID was going on. It was history making each and every day. And so being a kid, I always say, from West River to the West Wing is a story that, first of all, I love to share with you all because you could do it too. You know how I got that internship? I applied online at whitehouse.gov. And obviously recommendation letters help. Having other internships where bosses can write you letters and send support is helpful as well. But again, it's not because mom and dad called and got me the internship, because they have nothing to do with politics. And it's not because anybody handed it to me. It just takes applying online and submitting an application and taking a chance. And from that time on, I realized that I wanted to stay in Washington, D.C. and get my law degree there, because to get an education in law in the place that law is made, and where our country, the crucible of our capital, was going to be an incredible experience to see how that all works out there, because from when I was in 7th grade, I was very frustrated by not understanding how all of it worked. And so when I was taking administrative law, I had classmates who were working in administrative agencies talking about what their experiences were like. And so I got to an education not only in the classroom setting, but from my fellow classmates who were all working in our government or working for entities that worked with the government. And it's such a unique experience, and I'm glad I did it. I know that a lot of people give me flack for going to Washington, D.C. and spending time out there, but sometimes it's just as much of an education to see what you don't want as much as what you do want, and to know what's coming, and to ensure that it doesn't happen here in South Dakota, because you need to know thy enemy, right? And especially in law school, they teach you to know the other side's argument just as well as your own, if not better. And so getting to sit in classrooms full of some of the most liberal activists in the country, I got to hear where they're coming from, their arguments, and understand that so that we can counter them even better. And so while I was in law school, I got the opportunity to be a Blackstone Fellow for the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is an incredible organization that fights a lot of the religious rights and freedoms cases in our country. And they do a really great job supporting conservative lawyers and young law students in that field, because there's not a lot of organizations on the right that do that for young lawyers. And then in one of the semesters, I worked on the Senate Judiciary Committee for Senator Josh Hawley, and I got to work on amicus briefs to the Supreme Court, which was really incredible. They're about Section 230, which is the law that allows, essentially right now, social media companies to censor us. And there's cases at the Supreme Court to hopefully make it so that there's more transparency in those communications between the government and these private entities. And that law actually was written with good intent. It was supposed to be filtration for porn on the internet back, before we were even born, when there was a proliferation of that on the internet, and there still is now. But that was the intent, was to allow these companies to censor that, to make the internet a safer place for children. And now we see what evil it has been done, so that people that have our viewpoints are being silenced, and it's even potentially affecting election outcomes. But so that was obviously very educational. And then the most incredible thing that I got to do actually was work for an election law firm. And so getting that opportunity, Vivek Ramaswamy was one of our clients even, and so working on, preparing essentially, instead of working for a company or working for, someone who has been criminally charged as your client, your company is a campaign. And so not a lot of people really understand that. Those bigger campaigns, they have their own attorneys. They have lots of attorneys, actually, for a lot of different things. And so getting to work in the big leagues and see how that actually all operates was very, very educational. And it kind of full circle tied me back to my roots in the SOS office, or the Secretary of State's office, working, watching petitions get validated and seeing, candidates get certified, and just the inner workings of all the way from the national level down to the local level and how we do it here in South Dakota. And then I came home, and so I actually finished up my last real semester of law school at the University of South Dakota School of Law. South Dakota is one of the only states that has Indian law on the bar exam, and Georgetown Law at the time was not teaching an Indian law class. So I wanted to come home and make sure that I took a class on Indian law, given that there's so much of that in our state, and it's important, especially in the election law context, to understand some of those jurisdictional differences and voting rights and access when it comes to tribal issues in Indian country. And so that was a really incredible experience to get kind of the best of both worlds of being in Georgetown and then also coming home and going back to my roots at USD. So I kind of felt like I was a super senior because I got extra little bit of time in Vermilion. And that was all while I was competing to be at Miss USA as Miss South Dakota. And so living both of those lives at the same time was a little hectic. But I will say that if you have a dream on your heart, people will tell you, oh, you have too much on your plate, you're too young. If you really want to do it and you have the grit and the guts and the chutzpah to get up in the morning and work from 5 o'clock in the morning sometimes, and I was getting out of class when I was in DC at 9:50 at night because I went to night school while I was working during the day. If you have a dream and you're passionate about it, it's easy to get up because it doesn't really feel like work. So, chase your dreams, and if you really want to get involved, there are ways to do that. So after coming home, I spent some time last summer in the governor's office as a law clerk, and then I also spent some time at Gunderson Palmer, which is a law firm on Main Street in Rapid City. Worked under Sarah Frankenstein a little bit on some election law issues, and she and I had known each other since I was 13 and got involved in the pageant world. She's actually the former Miss South Dakota, for those of you who didn't know that. And so she was the first female lawyer that I'd ever met, and somebody that I look up to as a role model in that context. But after those two experiences, I realized that I missed a little bit of playing around in the big leagues, since I wanted to figure out a way that I could be in South Dakota, do election law, run for office here, and come home with what I always wanted to do, but also use my degree in a way that I knew was going to be impactful. And so I started digging around, figuring out what firms potentially would afford me the opportunity to do that. And again, sent a couple cold emails with some resumes, and got a response back from the woman who actually represented President Trump at the Supreme Court recently. So that 9-0 Supreme Court case, that was just one to allow President Trump access to the ballot, was my law firm's case. And so I'll be working for the firm that represents him. Right now we're working on cases against Planned Parenthood, a bunch of issues to do with injunctions, trying to silence people, social media censorship. We do a lot of conservative litigation, and so I'm very excited to be mentored by, her name is Harmeet Dillon, and she is originally from California, but they have law firms all over the country, and my immediate superior told me that he had traveled last year to cases in 17 states, so they go all over the country, and so whether or not I was in a cubicle in Washington, D.C. or sitting here in South Dakota working from an office really didn't matter to them, because your clients don't care as long as you're writing the briefs for them. And I probably won't appear in front of a judge for a little while, because as a young lawyer you need some training in that context before you get in front of courts. But that's what I'll be doing after I graduate, and it's very nice to be a part of a firm that works in that context, because they understand that, in the position of being a legislator, that I could be working on cases in other states where they don't have a statute that they need, that I might be learning something that we could put in place to protect South Dakota before that kind of lawsuit happens here. And so that's my goal, not only as a lawyer but as a legislator, to have those two worlds collide and work together to protect our state, not only in the courts but also in the legislative branch. But like I said, I grew up on a hunting ranch. Like, my dad doesn't even know what law school I went to. Sometimes he'll tell people I go to George Washington and not Georgetown. So that's about how gleefully unaware they are of what I'm doing in some ways. And I'm proud to be their daughter, and they've always been so supportive of me. But regardless of the background that you come from, or the privilege you do or do not have, or whatever you see as your adversities or things that are up against you in this world, if you want to get involved and make a difference, you can. And that's my message today, is that I have an organization that I'm a part of. It's called Run Gen Z, and it was started by a kid out of Iowa. His name's Joe, and Nick and I know him well, but he was elected at 21 and is a legislator in Iowa. We have friends now all across the country. President Trump came and spoke to us, and afterwards him and I were talking a little bit because I was a previous intern for him, and so we were chatting a little bit about how important it is to get young people involved. And so, all the way from the top, from the big man himself, all the way down to me standing in front of you today, get involved in your community. Make sure that if you want to get involved, that you're reaching out and being proactive about it, because they're not going to come and thump you on the head. But if you feel like you have a calling in your heart, you're religious, if God is calling you to get involved, then do it. And you're not too young to get involved, and the more experience that you can have, whether you're an intern or not. I've done a lot of stuff as an intern, gotten to see a lot of things as an intern that sometimes even staff members didn't get to see because of the way offices are set up. And so you're not just an intern, you get to do some real work, especially in states like South Dakota. You're nodding your head because you were a legislative intern. I'm sure you did a lot of real work. And so, especially in South Dakota where we don't have staff for our legislators, getting out there and going and doing that, you get to have and Carly was an intern as well. So I'm not preaching to the choir here, but it's really important because we don't have staff members for our legislators, and so it's the kids that run the world in some ways, and it's the same thing in Washington, D.C. In some, it's the swamp, but even in the conservative offices, the 20-something-year-olds are the ones doing all the work and making the wheels spin, and so without that, our country was founded by 20-something-year-olds, and it's still run by them in a lot of ways, because we're the ones grinding it out to make the older people look good in some ways. And so, get involved in any way that you can. If you want to go and see how other states do it, don't be ashamed of doing that either, because that's good experience to see, how other states do it for good reasons and how other states do it for very bad reasons too. But like I said, it's a good education, and when you're young, you should go out and experience those things, and then come home. Come back to South Dakota and put it to work here, because we need people like you all getting involved in our government, because we are the future, and we are the voice for our generation. We pay taxes, we get involved, and if you can go and fight for our country at 18 and defend our country, you should be getting involved in politics too. So that's my pitch, and I'm going to sit down now. The timer is a little nerve-wracking. I feel like I'm in debate prep or something again. Very, very aware of the time, but if you have any questions about, my background, different internships I've done, if you want to be connected with somebody I've maybe worked for before, or questions about where to live, if you're going to go intern in DC or something like that, let me know. I'm happy to be a resource. Even if you don't agree with my politics necessarily, I'm happy to help with, your careers involved in, getting involved in our state. So just hope to be an inspiration for other young people to get involved, because I don't want to be the only one in Pierre that's under the age of 50.
Right.
Thank you, guys.
All right, the time is going, so I can talk. You got to know a little bit about me to understand where I am going and why I believe what I believe. So you got to know that my history, where I came from, and how I got here. I grew up in Colorado. My family goes back to Colorado before it was a state. We came out and homesteaded, built ranches, and slowly moved into the cities. And my grandfather's side, we are immigrants from Sweden. They came out and stayed up in Michigan. He joined the Navy in World War I. He got tuberculosis, moved to Colorado, where he met my grandmother. My grandmother was a nurse in the Army, and he was an enlisted man in the Navy. They fell in love. It was not allowed. They got married though, they eloped, and they lived up by Golden, and then up into a little town called Evergreen, and that's where my grandparents raised their family. Growing up, I had a profound love for this nation. I've always been patriotic. Didn't grow up in a Christian household, didn't care, lived crazy, lived wild. My dad was very military. My dad is a retired colonel in the Army. I have 3 older sisters, and he persuaded every single one of them, he tried to anyway, to join the Army. None of them wanted to do it. When he came to me, he kind of about gave up because my mom she didn't want me to join into a military school like my dad wanted me to. He wanted me to go in military school as young as I possibly could, and she stopped that. But the words that he had to say about the military, it actually just kind of took root. And I was, when it came time to graduate, I knew that I'd probably waste my time going to college at first. So I decided to join the Navy and not waste my life. So I joined the Navy because my dad was in the Army, and I wanted to get back at him a little bit because that's what sons do sometimes with their fathers. They give back at their fathers. So this profound just patriotism in my family, I can trace back my family all the way back to the Revolutionary War. We have served, always served. My sons will be the first ones in my family not to serve, but that is for good reason. So, why do I say all that? I say it because what I've seen in Colorado, where I came from when I moved here in 2020, was because of where I saw my state go. Back in 2004, we had a Republican governor, we had a Republican Senate, and a Republican House. In 2 years, we lost it. How did that happen? Because there's a group of people that were very well funded that were virtually unknown, but some were billionaires, a couple millionaires. And one is now the current governor. That is Tim Gill, who was the owner of Quark. I don't know if you've ever heard of that software. He was worth billions. You know, most people don't even know that anymore. Worth billions of dollars. Then we have Pat Stryker, who is Patricia Stryker. She was an heiress to the medical family that started the medical, Stryker Medical, or medical, whatever, devices. Then we have Rut Bridges, who was a geologist, who was worth millions, and he was quoted as saying, "I have so much money, I don't know what to do with it." And then we have Jared Polis. Jared Polis, while serving in the U.S. House of Representatives, was the richest man to be in the U.S. House of Representatives. How did he make his money? Through a greeting card company, through Pro Flowers, through other businesses that he had started. Now granted, I appreciate him starting on those businesses, but then he took that money and started getting people and activists and changing the mindset of those people in Colorado. And so what actually started happening is they started electing weaker Republicans and funding them so they could get in. So that's what started happening. They started getting in. Weaker Republicans started getting in, things that people that I call rhinos, that came in to the Colorado, and when they saw that they were not very functional, the people of Colorado wanted change. So what do? You start running stronger Democrats that seem to be speaking the language that the people want. So you've got this red state, or purple at least. So I have a saying, if people say that it's a red state, it's probably purple, and they say it's a purple state, then it's probably a blue state. So you got weak Republicans, and now you got stronger Democrats. You're not getting anything done in your party because no one's following the party platform. If you're not following the party platform, then you can believe or do anything you want to. So we have somebody that's coming up, kind of like Obama, or somebody that is eloquent in their speech, people that are saying that they believe in the Constitution, but yet they're Democrats. and you're gonna say they're all for gun control, they're all for, remember, Obama would say something like, yeah, same-sex marriage. They'd make these strong statements of saying something that we as Republicans would probably identify with. Many of my Republican friends in 2008 were bamboozled by people like Obama. But even before, we had Democrats that were in office in Colorado who were very strong Democrats. We had a governor right after our Republican governor, Bill Owens, who was one of those Democrats. All it took was people that say, vote for the person, not for the party. I'm sure you've heard that, right? It's wrong. Vote for the party, not the person. Vote for the party because the party leadership matters. If you vote for the person, then you're gonna look at somebody that says, well, I'm a strong Democrat. I'm a blue dog Democrat. I'm gonna vote like this. So if you have weak Republicans and you have strong Democrats, and you're saying that you're gonna vote for the person and not the party, then you're gonna switch and you're gonna vote for the people that are the blue dog Democrats. And once they get in, then you're gonna start seeing the switch. And you're gonna think, well, the person isn't gonna let me down. The person isn't gonna let you down. No, the person may not let you down, but the party's going to let you down. So when you go and you vote Democrat, you are going to have problems because the state that you love, the state that you want, where the people are red, but many of the people that are in the legislature are blue and they vote blue and they vote horribly, and you got people that are Democrats that are in some cases voting higher. Don't believe me? Look at CPAC. You'll see their scores. So, what got me involved here in South Dakota? Well, a little radio show that I did, which is beyond me. I never asked to do this. I'm an insurance guy. All I did was I asked to do a radio ad, and I did a weekly spot. And the people that did those ads for me on the radio station, they liked my voice, they liked my passion, and they liked what I said. A year later, after I had switched, because I moved here in 2020 to get away from the craziness that I just explained in Colorado and moved up here, I wanted to make more money. I just got up here because I had to get up here. So I took a job doing insurance. Most of the time, I was the owner of the insurance agency. Being a producer, you can't make that much money. So I moved over and did mortgages. While I was there, I got a phone call out of the blue that asked me if I wanted to host a radio show. And I was like, not no, but hell no, I don't want to do that. I want to be able to eat. I want to be able to, as you can tell, I like to eat. So I wanted to, I was intrigued by it, but I said no. 2 weeks later, I couldn't get out of my mind. I believed that God was telling me to kind of take it. So I prayed about it, and I decided to go for it. We worked out a contract that came up to my terms, and we did it. Right off the bat, I started giving the passion that I have inside of my heart right now to be able to speak about the things that I saw in Colorado. I swore that when I got here that I was not going to let South Dakota turn like I've seen. I'm not going to let South Dakota turn like I've seen Colorado go. It is a very real possibility that what happened in Colorado can happen here. So I will defend South Dakota with everything that I have because I want South Dakota to be as free as possible. I hate tyranny. I hate the jackboot of government on my neck. I want to be able to live free. I want my children to live free. We got to turn this country back, and I believe from the headwaters, that's where we clean up the waters that go to the swamp. If we want to change the swamp, we gotta have clean water. Where did that come from? From the headwaters. We've got to change the headwaters that are here in South Dakota, locally, through the city, through the county, committee men, committee women, legislators. We've got to change that culture so we can change the culture that flows to the swamp. Even at my age, I might be a little bit starry-eyed, and I might be a little bit, I don't know what the word is, but idealistic. I don't know. But I have a belief in my heart that we can make this country free. Whatever passion that you have in your heart to get you involved, for me, it's a voice. My whole entire life, I've not liked government telling what we can and cannot do. Saying that our property isn't ours when you can't, you can pay it off, but you can never fully own it because you're gonna have to pay, you're gonna give your gold to the king every year so you can live on your own property, or you're a serf to the government. I think we should be free. I don't think that we should have those property taxes. I think it should be tied to something else. It shouldn't be tied to something that can be held over you, right? It shouldn't be something where if I don't pay, my property can be taken away. It should be tied to something that we use, not something that we have acquired, something that we have earned, something that is, George Washington said that freedom and property rights they are entwined. We cannot separate the two. If you don't have property, you won't have freedom. The two have to coexist. So, we have a problem in South Dakota. Now you can look at the CFL, and people say it's cherry-picked. Citizens for Liberty say it's cherry-picked. Perhaps it is, but every single one of them are cherry-picked. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's Elevate. It doesn't matter if it's CPAC. It doesn't matter who it is. They're picking out the ones that they want. They're picking out the ones that they want to see to make those people that they want look good. Or do they just pick the ones that are for freedom? Or do they pick the ones that are just for business? And can the two coexist? I find it interesting that in elevated rapid cities, you can have all these people that get 100% on that, but you can go to CPAC, and they're not getting 100%. You're gonna look at CFL, not getting 100%. You're gonna look at other, but on Elevate, when it's business related, they're getting 100%. I don't know if Elevate has our best interest at heart. I want to follow after people that want the Constitution. I want people that want the Declaration of Independence. This kind of freedom is something that is inside of me that I have to work out of me. The reason why I'm getting involved, because over those 2 years of being on the radio show and learning, it's like it was a primer for South Dakota politics. I swear that when I came here, I wanted to bury my head. I came out of Colorado thinking, dear God, I made it to South Dakota. Now I do not want to I won't be under that tyranny that I had in Colorado. And slowly I started to see more and more and more that that tyranny is coming in and taking over the state. And I don't know if it's intentional, or if it's after self-serving interest, or if it's after, I don't know what it is. People are motivated by only a few things. Power, money, sex. Usually those are the big three. There might be other motivators. Or do you have good intentions? So if you're gonna go after your dream of getting into politics, whatever level that may be on, at your age, I was politically minded, but there was no way that I was ever going to get involved. Everybody has their stepping on point. I don't know what gets you all involved in politics, but for me, it's when it comes personal and that government that has become too big is now the beast that wants to kill you. Our government was never supposed to be run like this. It was supposed to be very small. And the taxes that we were supposed to have were very defined. And now we have taxes on everything. You get your dollar gets taxed how many times? There's a better way for this to happen. We can change that back, I do believe. So, I don't know where we go, but we gotta get involved. I feel compelled to run. I don't want to. It's not in my comfort zone. It's not where I want to be. I have a voice. I gotta use it. Everybody has a voice. So what are we gonna do? Where are we gonna go? Is this the state that we want? Is this how we want things to run? Do we want it to be like this? When we have SB 201 and we got people that, are arguing with the PUC and saying that the PUC is now gonna have the right, they don't even want the right to be able to say what you can and cannot do in your own property unless it's, eminent domain. There's a hoop to get through. It has to be for public use. This Summit Carbon Solutions and these CO2 pipelines, I don't think ever met that. But because we have lawmakers that voted for it, so that SB 201 got passed, by law now, it says that they can, that the PUC is gonna have the ability to take away people's property. The landowners don't want it. They said they had a landowner's bill of rights, but the landowners don't like it. So how much of the landowner's bill of rights? A little trick in politics is give it a name that everybody likes and you can get it passed. Oh, it's landowner's bill of rights, but they have no more rights. There's a problem that we have in Pierre. That's why I'm running. Because I don't want what I see happening in Pierre and the negligence of the legislators to take away people's rights because they have the law, that they can make the laws and do what they want that are unconstitutional, to go and to make that happen just because they wanted to. SB 201 is an abomination. It is. So these are just ramblings of a madman that my passion is what I got. I don't have eloquent speeches. I don't have anything. I just have my passion and why I want to run. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you both again for speaking to us. I'm going to open up the floor now to Q&A, so if you guys both want to come up here, feel free to.
Or the chair.
Or I got you.
I'll just stand. I could have used some water though.
I'll be a little more accommodating next time.
I always come prepared.
I should have.
I have a question. I'm a sixth generation South Dakotan, so when you say something's wrong with our state, I take offense to that. I love South Dakota. So I have a question for you. I'm the first legislator to date that has passed a public safety law on marijuana. I've enhanced the penalty on several laws,
Okay.
and I'm a firm believer in having strong laws. I think they serve as a deterrence. So I'd just like to ask each of you how you feel about that. That's kind of what I have done in the state legislature. So, thank you.
Amber, why don't you start?
Yeah, so strong laws on marijuana specifically? Or just
No,
strong-
I enhanced the penalty for accessory to first or second degree murder. Currently in South Dakota, it was up to 5 years. And we have a lot of crime happening in Rapid City. And so I just felt that we needed to have a stiffer penalty on that because people were putting people in the ground and afraid that their bodies would be found, and so they dug them up and moved them to another area. And a person in Rapid City got 4 years for that. We had another guy that was murdered in a pickup. The gentleman in the truck cleaned up the blood, burned all of his belongings, threw him in a ditch, and got like up to 5 years in the state penitentiary. So to me, married to a prosecutor for decades, he's a circuit court judge now. All my kids are lawyers. So I figured, I shouldn't say I figured, I knew that there had to be a stricter, harsher penalty on that. I also found an inconsistency in the DUI laws. I fixed that. Presumptive probation for theft of a firearm. Currently, you can steal a firearm up to $5,000, and you will get presumptive probation, which is automatic probation. So I did away with that. So that's the kind of laws that I've concentrated on. So just wanted your opinion on each of you, if you could do that.
Yeah, I mean, I spent 3 years reading black letter law and textbooks, and you know, I have a huge respect for the rule of law. My dad is a deputy sheriff back where he was originally from when he was younger, and have gotten the endorsements of all 3 sheriffs in the counties in District 30. So I'm definitely a rule of law candidate. I think we should respect our law enforcement. I think that it's sad in some ways South Dakota doesn't have as many resources that some of these folks need to defend our communities. Right now, one of the big issues in Custer right now is that the Custer State Park requires the sheriffs to go and take care of everything happening during the summer of all the tourists, and the money that they actually pay the Custer Police Department serves for like 3 days worth of what it costs in a year. So, you know, they're paying for 3 days, but they're serving 365 days out of the year. And so, you know, if we're not giving the resources to the folks that are actually apprehending these criminals, then, you know, we're not getting them off the streets. And then your issue is obviously the prosecution of these people on the back end of it. And, you know, as a young lawyer, it's great to hear that your family are all lawyers. I know we demonize lawyers, and I hate the joke that's like, you know, when you have a good lawyer and they're at the bottom of an ocean or whatever.
I hate those too.
Yeah. But I will say that if we have good, strong conservative lawyers that are standing up for the rule of law, for the Constitution, that are, you know, trying to keep our communities safe by putting these people away, they don't have the tools that they need, the statutes that they need to prosecute these people under, and they're going free. That's terrible. When I worked in the Virginia Attorney General's office, he's actually the one starting the George Soros, anti-George Soros fund, to fund, you know, rule of law prosecutors across the country so that we're not electing liberal prosecutors. So it's obviously a huge issue, not necessarily happening quite yet here in South Dakota, but I'm sure it's coming. And so I haven't heard of any, you know, state's attorney's races that are being funded by George Soros, but it could be coming, and if we don't beef up our statutes in this area of law to ensure that we're, one, taking care of like the hard criminals, you know, we prosecute for, you know, right now marijuana, if you have a, you know, THC pen, you go to, you know, prison for that, but yet we can't put, you know, murderers away for, you know, they're getting put in prison sometimes longer for possession of drugs than they are for killing people, and that's not how the penalty should work, obviously. So, you know, as a future attorney, I hope to be a voice for some of this, and be able to read the statutes and explain how a judge would look at some things, people in the legislature that don't come from this background.
Right.
Because it is helpful, you know, we have a citizen legislature, but it's good to have a couple lawyers there.
So, yeah, you probably took exception to what I had to say. And that's fine. You know, we don't ever see eye to eye on anything.
Sure.
And when you're in the legislature, you have that going on all the time. The thing of it is that you can talk to anybody, get along with anybody, but to step off my firm beliefs and what I have to say and where I come from, like I said, that's where I say where I came from in Colorado, saying I will not let that happen in South Dakota. It's because I've seen the hellhole that Colorado has become, and it should never.
So how do you feel about stiffer penalties then for offenders?
We need the rule of law, without a doubt. We have laws on the books that if we upheld them, we wouldn't have to put on many more laws how to do that. But unfortunately, there's everybody trying to find the loophole to get around it. So then you gotta make more laws, and it seems like a crisscross, and you can open up a book of laws and just go, okay, where is it all over, you know, where are they all overlay? you'll probably be amazed that we probably have enough laws in there already that would probably suit the issue at hand.
Well, we passed another good one this year, Senate Bill 98. Look that up and look and see who voted and didn't vote.
Just
on
very
Senate
quickly,
Bill.
what's that about?
Okay, my husband tried to pass this 20 years ago. He gave it to a legislator. It's to allow prior acts in on sexual rape and molestation of children. And it's so important because, as you know, kids don't disclose. Sometimes it's days, weeks, years before they disclose. And so federal court has always allowed that, prior acts in, but South Dakota has not. So we passed that bill this year. So, but you'd be surprised at people who voted against that. It'll be shocking. You'll have to look it up.
I will.
Senate Bill 98.
Sure. And I would like to see everything about that bill, you know, but to say it right now and speak about it, that I'm not familiar with.
Sure.
would be
It is just
huge.
allowing prior acts, and because they have distinct behaviors, child rapists do. So
Yeah.
we want to be able to bring in all those prior acts.
We need the rule of law.
Yeah.
Criminals need to be charged. They need to go and spend their time in jail and not be able to be let off. If we don't have the rule of law, then what do we have? Nothing.
But
So,
it's not
as
just
far-
applying the rule of law, it's making sure that the rule of law, the way that the statutes are written, that the penalties are equating for the crime.
Right.
And I think that right now we do have way too many in some ways criminalizing things that, you know, you're getting penalties, like I said earlier, that are more than killing people, and that we're not harsh enough when we should be. And so that's where we need to do a complete overhaul of looking at where there maybe is too much government overreach, you know, the government's on your neck, right?
Correct.
And, you know, where we're criminalizing people for just trying to live their lives. But then there are also areas of law that our state isn't safe right now, where we're letting criminals go free, and God forbid we do start getting some liberal prosecutors in here that are going to, you know, be releasing people like we're seeing in other parts of the country. We don't want that happening.
Plus,
I
we
think
don't
some
have the
liberal
stomach to,
judges
we don't have the
want-
stomach to go after those that, have I don't know how to put it. There are many of those that are here, right, that are causing a lot of the crimes. But there's no stomach to go after them with the rule of law.
Well, last year we passed truth in sentencing, and I'll quit talking because I could talk on and on, but that was an important bill we passed too. So when you look at this, and you know, none of those get put on scorecards, by the way. None of those bills get put on anybody's scorecards, and to me, they are some of the most important legislation that you can pass in our state. Your son's a police officer, you know all about it. Those should be on every scorecard. Anyway, I'll quit
Well,
talking and let somebody else
like I said,
ask.
scorecards, someone told me one time, well, the scorecards are cherry picked. I'm like, yeah, you're right, they are.
But shouldn't those be on there, the Citizens for Liberty? I'm like, where are all these public safety laws? Why aren't they in there?
Yeah, I don't know how they picked theirs.
Yeah.
But I know how contentious that is between CFL and all that. But so I look at CPAC. I mean, do you like CPAC?
CPAC doesn't have any either, do
Yeah.
they? And those
I don't
are
know,
important.
and I don't know why they choose. It's the people. So, do you think that? I guess I would have to say is on the scorecards. Do you think that organizations like CPAC, I know where you feel like on CFL, but like organizations that aren't even here that pick these things, do you think that they're going after and targeting certain legislators to make them look bad?
I don't know. I don't think I want to answer that.
Okay. Fair enough. I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll let somebody else ask a question.
Yeah.
Sure.
As a former narcotics officer, I know the problems associated with drug use. We're going to see another bill in the near future to legalize marijuana. Colorado's already seen the horrors of it.
Mhm.
Oregon is rescinding some of their laws.
Mhm.
How do you guys feel about legalizing marijuana?
Sure, I'll go first. So, have you ever heard, I've interviewed Ed Moses probably like 3
I know
times.
Ed
I've
Moses.
gone around, okay. So, narcotics officer, right, in Missouri. He, very compelling. I think what we have right now, I'm totally against even the legalization of medical marijuana, because it's not something that's even medical in the terms of what medical is. You
Yeah.
can't get a prescription, right? It's not, you can't get, they give you a card. You prescribe what you want. Doctor, go heal thyself. Well, doctor, go get your buds of what you want, because no bud is gonna be the same, it can't be, it's botanical. So whatever you get off the same plant could be completely different. We don't know what the THC level's gonna be in that. So medical marijuana is a ruse, and you might as well, anybody, the way the laws are written, you can, without a card, go smoke marijuana, get pulled over, and say it's for medical reasons, and you're good. But the legalization of, like, I saw that in Colorado. When that happened, people are like, as an insurance agent, they're like, what happened first 6 months? What's changed? And I'm like, well, believe it or not, I haven't seen anything. Within a year, I was wrong. I mean, I wanted to come up with a bumper sticker that said, put down the bong and drive. I literally saw people driving around in Boulder with a bong.
That's my bill, made it illegal to smoke marijuana or its derivatives in a motor vehicle. That's my bill.
Yeah,
That passed into law. It was my very first one.
fantastic.
Thank you.
So, I mean, yeah, medical marijuana and legalization and, you know, recreational marijuana? No, thank you. I don't want to hear. Colorado is a hellhole. I can't, when I go back to see my dad, he's 95, he's not gonna move away from there now. When I go there, I just shake my head. It's horrible. And I do not want that here.
I think the way that South Dakota went about legalizing medical marijuana is wrong, and I think that that's a huge part of the issue. Is my dad's a disabled veteran and has a brain tumor and has all kinds of issues, and at the end of his life, that's something that actually is prescribed and is done properly, where it is an actual medication controlled by a physician, where it comes in the form of like a serum or a pill that is distributed that way, where it's
That's good.
actually used in a medical context. I think it's great, especially with how much the opioid epidemic has been affecting, especially our veterans and that population. God forbid I ever had a child one day that had seizures or some other kind of, you know, terrible medical condition, and that was the only thing that could help them because they're children and they can't take some of these experimental drugs that would help them. I think in that context, if it's actually being used as medication and it can bring people relief, in that sense, I'm not against it. And I know in Hot Springs especially, there's a huge population of people over the age of 65 who want access to this in a medical context. This is what gives them pain relief, and they don't want to be addicted to opioids or, you know, on other drugs that are big pharma that are, you know, even worse than some of these drugs. That said, South Dakota legalized this on an initiative referendum, and there are problems with that because the legislators weren't, you know, able to actually put in place things like making sure that people aren't driving high. And now the Department of Health has all of the power here, and to me, when you give administrative agencies the power to carry out everything, you have a mess. And so we're, first of all, not doing medical right, so we're not even ready for the conversation of recreational, because we can't even figure out medical. And so until we even figured that out, I don't even want to touch recreational. And I went to law school in DC, which is a free-for-all, not only with weed, but mushrooms and everything else. And you can't walk down the street in some places without smelling like it. And you know, it needs to just be like smoking too. Like, you know, you can't go into a bar nowadays, cigarette smoke. It needs to be regulated just like alcohol and tobacco and everything else if it's going to be. But I haven't seen a state that has really figured out how to do it properly. And then that's not even to mention the issues with the Second Amendment and people not being aware of it being federally still on the schedule, and how it can affect your gun ownership rights, which are super important to me as the daughter of a gunsmith and an FFL dealer. You know, growing up, my parents' livelihood was based off of that, and people aren't aware of how it can affect them.
Yeah, because if you even get a card, you lose your
Yeah.
Second Amendment rights.
So I don't like the card system. I don't really appreciate some of the stuff with the localities, how they force certain localities to get distribution sites and all of that. And I struggle with just the way in which it was enacted in our state, because I think that there's enough things on the ballot that people aren't educated enough about what they're, you know, signing up for. And it's only a little paragraph about what you're legalizing, and you don't really know what the full context of what it's going to look like when it first gets enacted. And so I was just in the gym the other day talking to an actual narcotics officer. He works out at the same time as me, and picking his brain about what he wants done in this context, because he's, you know, more focused on fentanyl and meth and the hard drugs that he, you know, isn't necessarily against legalizing it, but wants it to be done in a way that, you know, obviously we still have to deal with the federal government, it's still on the schedule at the federal level, but South Dakota's not doing it right now, and it's not being used for what it's supposed to be used for. I'm not against the people that like actually need it, but it's the bad actors that aren't using it properly, and it's gonna cause many, many issues.
In my 10 years in narcotics, I never met a narcotics addict that didn't start with marijuana.
And it's not just marijuana anymore, they have all the waxes and stuff, so it's like a really high content.
It's a different drug.
It's
They
very,
get all
very
the way up.
complicated now, yeah.
You have scromiting, you have kids that are getting into it, you have it in gummies and they think it's candy, and the next thing you know, I've talked to Jim Kenyon multiple times, and the sadness that he has on his face for what he has seen that's happened to young kids. You know, we all think that the war on drugs is I mean, some people think that the war on drugs is has failed. And on some levels, I could say, when you're looking at it, possibly, you can see that and come away and say the war on drugs has failed, but I don't think that on the other side of it, the alternative to just let it open and have free reign, and it's a very libertarian mindset, which I can identify with, but on drugs, I don't see it, because one of the parts of the libertarian mindset is, and ethos, is no harm to others, right? Don't do this. But as an insurance agent, I can tell you that I've seen rates go sky high after marijuana has been introduced into a state. And rates did go up. So what harm has not happened? And then seeing people die from this and killing other people, oh, that doesn't happen. No, it does. It does, it absolutely does. And especially with these waxes and these high limits of THC, you're gonna see more and more of this. It is not the harmless, your daddy's skunk weed from 1960. It's just not.
And you mentioned the lookalikes too. That was one thing that I worked on in the Virginia Attorney General's office. He was one of the first attorney generals to pass a lookalike ban. So those like, you know, candies and things that look just like a Doritos
Suckers,
bag or a
yeah.
Suckers.
Oh, yeah.
We actually sued companies that were creating those under patent infringement because they looked too much like the label of like Doritos. And so some of these major, you know, candy and snack companies helped us, you know, work on not only a lawsuit, but then now they have regulations in Virginia so that dispensaries can't sell those because it's a patent infringement. It has to look enough different and have certain labeling on it. And that's something that we could pass here in South Dakota to make sure that even these medical marijuana sites aren't selling those, and have that in place that, you know, if the federal level ever did legalize it or take it off the schedule, that we would have kind of trigger laws already in place to protect our kids from things like that. And my experiences as a law clerk and intern have showed me those things in other states. And so that's one way that, you know, other states have done things right that we can do here to protect the people in South Dakota.
One thing to keep in mind too, is once you legalize it, you can't go back.
Yeah. Well, it's already out of the box now too, in a lot of ways. I know we talked about that when we first met, about how Pandora's box is opened, so how do we, you know, put it back into the offense?
A question in the back there.
So, you're hoping to represent District 30. What's the biggest issue in District 30, and how will you solve that at the state level?
I think-
You go ahead.
I'll go first. I think the biggest issue right now is property taxes, and that's what I hear the most. Every forum I go to, that's the biggest issue that's talked about for the longest time. I think the problem is right now the property tax formula is calculated so that in wealthy areas that can afford to have nice schools, they raise more taxes locally and they can have nicer schools. Well, right now, the Black Hills area has seen almost like an artificial inflation in equity in their houses. They're not necessarily wealthy people themselves, but because of the market, that's caused this, and the state is no longer giving money to the area for education because they're raising it locally. And so I'm not a tax expert. I took a couple classes in law school on federal income tax and taxation, but it's not my specialty. But that's what I think that, you know, your second part of the question was, what are we gonna do to change it? Whether that be making sure that the state, especially in these areas that are they're rich in land, but not rich in cash. First of all, people can't be taxed out of their homes, but to change the formula somehow so that in these situations where there's this artificial inflation in wealth by land, that the state is still continuing to give the amount of educational dollars that they were giving to that area, and then maybe do some kind of rebate back. But I've sat in equalization offices for multiple hours now, talking to people that work in these offices that calculate your taxes, the programs that they use, looking at how this is actually administered, and whatever the solution is has to include these people, because if we're not thinking about, you know, how these bills that we're passing in here will actually play out, that's the problem, and that's where they get these pushbacks from the municipal leagues and things like that, because the people that, you know, for example, Fall River County, their computer program, and this is not a, you know, sexy, you know, winning the day argument, but their computer program couldn't even calculate the assessment values the way that Trish Ladner's bill was proposing to do. Like, they didn't have the system to even be able to enact that, even if it did get passed. And so we're not communicating with our state, or I'm sorry, our county and local officials enough when we're passing these things in here to know that it's actually going to work on the ground level. And like I said, this is not my expertise. I will never claim to be a tax expert. That's why we have accountants and people that are experts in this area. But the most important thing is that the experts get with the people who actually have to administer these programs that are doing this. And the people in our area need relief, and I haven't heard a good solution that actually will be possible to be enacted that's gonna actually solve the problem. And I'm not, especially because this is kind of an experiment, I'm not in favor of amending our constitution to fix the problem, because who knows if in a couple of years it changes. That bothers me. And another thing that bothers me about a lot of these conversations is we're not thinking about, I hear a lot of like socialistic arguments sometimes when we're messing with like property tax assessments. Like, let the market's doing what the market's doing. And I get concerned about capping assessment values and doing different things that, you know, I'm libertarian in some senses where I want the market to do what the market's doing, but obviously people can't be taxed out of their homes, and people our age that want to buy homes can't afford to keep them or pay the taxes on them either. So something needs to be done. I don't have a perfect solution, but I think it starts with something to do with the education formula more than it does with the assessment values of homes.
So you know where I live.
Yeah, I do.
Since you had it built. You know, when we came in, the people that sold their house, they wanted to get as much as they could for the house. I never blame anybody for getting as much as they can for their house. The problem is that when the next people come in, everybody's even looking at the new people that are coming in. You bought the house, you raised my rates. No, I didn't do it. It was the people that sold the house that raised your rates, not me. I bought the house because I could afford it, and I wanted it, so I bought it. There's something inherently wrong, and I said this when I was up here speaking for my 20 minutes, is that I believe that property rights are inherently immoral. I think that they are atrocious. I think that having the government where you have to pay a tribute to the king every year so you can live on your own land is horrible. I think that if you don't have freedom with your land, then you don't really truly have freedom, because they can hold that over you and take away your house by gunpoint if you can't do it. So those people that have their house going up in value, even though they've been living there for 30 years and they could afford it back then, could possibly, I don't know their situation, but if they're living on a fixed income, they may not be able to afford the house that they're living in and would have to sell. And where are they going to go? Certainly not here. They won't be able to afford anything else. Where are they going to live? They're going to have to go to another state, leave their family. Something about that is immoral to me. So I think that anything that has to do with property taxes, it's not a step down, and I agree with you, where it's too socialistic. If we start manipulating, well, these people that have been living here for 30 years, they get a certain rate, and these new people that are in here, well, they got to pay all this. No, that's not fair and equal justice for everybody. Get rid of the property taxes. Find a different way. It should be based on, like I said, something that is something that you are using. Some people say that's a consumption tax. I don't like the consumption tax. Well, you know, if we have all these people that are coming here and tourists, they can be a part of that solution. I think there are solutions that are out there that I don't want to speak beyond my knowledge right now on, but there are certain things that I am starting to crack open and look at and starting to say, that could be a possibility. You know, I don't believe that we should have income tax, so that's not gonna work. I don't believe that we should do it on something that's attached to just our very act of living. It should be something that we use. Whether it be an increase in sales tax, which I abhor, but I would rather pay that because at least it's something that I can control. Or something that's even a user fee of, someone had said, like a fixed dollar amount per receipt that we get. So if whatever transaction, so if I go out to dinner, it's added onto that. If I go buy groceries, it's added onto that. If I buy a bottle of water, it's added onto that, but it's all the same. That adds up. I'm not against it. I wanna see if it works. I wanna crunch the numbers, and I wanna ask the people how we can do that. We have got to fix this property tax problem that we have, but it's not just here in South Dakota, it's all over the state, but all over the nation, but I think we can do it. I don't think, we never had property taxes. The first time we had property taxes was right after the Revolutionary War, for a very short period of time, because of the Navy, because of the expense that we incurred. After we got that paid off, the property taxes went away. And then they started creeping back in Massachusetts. And then other people are like going, well, hey, they're getting property taxes, why can't we? That's a way to fund. Okay, and then it started spreading like wildfire, to now we don't even know any different. I think we need to turn it back. We need to be that Massachusetts, but in reverse. Nebraska's already working on something like this. If they're working on it, they can figure it out. We certainly can.
I'm
So.
gonna say that the proposal that has the extra 25 cents on each receipt isn't necessarily equal application of the law to me, because if somebody buys a $500,000 combine, they're only paying 25 cents. If somebody buys a bottle of water or a can of soda, they're paying 25 cents, and that hurts poor people more than it hurts wealthier people. And not that I'm necessarily in the tax the rich, but if it's a use tax, I think it should be based off of a percentage of the cost of what you're buying. So if you're spending $400 on dinner, or $50 on dinner, you know, you should
That just be the
more.
sales tax.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to either one of those. I'm looking at both. So I don't know, and I understand that the proposal of saying, well, you're right, a pack of gum and it's 25 cents, or you're buying a $500,000 combine, it's 25 cents. A receipt is a receipt. I don't know if it's unfair to poor people, because poor people aren't just buying packs of gum, and they could be doing other things. I definitely don't believe in the socialism and making it unfair. So, like I said, I don't want to misspeak and overspeak right now on where I'm at, because I want to crunch the numbers, and I want to see where they are. But from what I've looked at, it seems like it's very doable. I just don't know if there's the political motivation in Pierre to get it done, and I don't know how much our internal revenue, or state revenue office is going to really like that too much. But if we're pulling in the same amounts, and we can back that up, what would be the problems?
We'll kind of rapid fire some of these last questions. I do want to respect their time,
Yeah,
of course. Carter had a question, and I believe you had a question as well. We'll start with Carter.
So term limits were implemented in North Dakota in 2022, and age limits might be on the ballot in North Dakota this fall. Would you commit to fighting for term limits in the state legislature, as well as some form of age limits?
Age limits is in like people that are too old?
Yes.
Well, first of all, I think that South Dakota, we have term limits here already, and those were implemented a couple years ago. And I think that term limits are absolutely needed at the national level in our Congress. But here in South Dakota, it has actually had a really interesting effect that I think in some ways can be detrimental, because the lobbyists are running the shop up there. And I know in the Senate, there's probably a turnover, I read the other day, of almost 13 people out of the 35 might turn over. And so there's not 14 people out of the 35 are gonna turn over. So there's not as much institutional knowledge of the legislators themselves. So then the lobbyists are the ones that actually know what's going on. And not that all lobbyists are bad, but when there's not institutional knowledge of good people that are good legislators that are doing their job, I mean, South Dakota has a really interesting process, and it's citizens that serve. There's not that many people who can take 3 months out of the year to go serve that have the ability to do that, and we have a small population anyway. So when you have good people who are civil servants who want to go to peer, who do a good job, and they're being forced to leave, even though they've done a good job, people in their community love them, and they're flipping back and forth between the houses because of stupid term limits in some ways, that's nonsense. They should be able to serve in their seat and keep serving there if the people that want them there have them there. I think it's a different story at the national level with the politics of how you get to the national level and how long people are out there. I think that there's a huge problem, especially with our president, of how old they are. I just actually went to a function with the Nixon Foundation, and former President Bush was speaking, and he's retired. He's painting pictures in his retirement, and he's younger than both of our presidential candidates for 2024. And that's scary as a young person. I don't think we necessarily have a problem in Pierre right now of people being too young, or I'm sorry, too old or too young, but too old. I don't think that we have any Joe Bidens in the state legislature that I know of that have dementia and are passing out, but I guess you can inform me. But if it becomes a problem in our state, then yes, but again, that's why I'm here talking to young people like you to get involved and lower that age average of people that are sitting at the table, because when you turn 18, you start paying taxes, you might as well have a seat at the table and have a voice, because we're involved just as much as other people as well. So that's my stance on term limits in South Dakota.
Yeah, I mean, we have term limits here in South Dakota, right? But then after they term out, whether it be in the House or in the Senate, then they can go ahead and run for, if they're in the House, they can run for the Senate. If they're in the Senate, they can run for the House and keep on going. Some people, I'm not necessarily against that, but because I believe that if you are good and you're passing good laws, I want you in there. I mean, so we can think about it on a national level. I don't want somebody like Rand Paul having term limits. I don't want somebody like Jim Jordan having term limits. I want him to keep on going as long as he's constitutional. I don't want him to have term limits. If you want term limits, we already have that provision in the U.S. Constitution, and that is you can vote and get their butts out. All you have to do is vote. We need people that are more engaged than having government get involved and say we're having term limits. Because if we have government doing that, then again, you may not seem like it, but we have the jackboot of government again on our necks, telling us what we can and cannot do. I want legislators that are passing laws that are laws of freedom and not laws of tyranny. If I get laws of tyranny, and what happens if you get people that have term limits and you just keep on turning people over just because it sounds good, we gain new people in. Again, I think what Amber said is true. The lobbyists are going to be the ones that are running the show because they're the ones that don't get the term limits. I think we have a problem with the lobbyists, but not all lobbyists are bad. So who do we get to say who are the good ones and who are the bad ones? Who has to take the responsibility onto their lives? The legislator themselves, to be able to say no and have that moral conviction inside of them, to be able to say no, that's bad and I'm not going to go that way, turn down the money and live out that conviction that they have. I want term limits. They sound good. I just don't think that the unintentional consequences that result from them are going to be what we think they're going to be. So that's my answer, but I think we need to get more involved. Did I answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so my question is primarily for candidate Smith. In your opening remarks, you alluded more than one time to an organization called Citizens for Liberty out of Rapid City. And so, and I'm aware of your history with certain members of that group that you had
Tanji and
repeatedly
Daphne.
on your radio show.
Yeah.
And so you have some sort of affiliation or affinity for their type of judgment in issues, I would think. And so my question is, since historically speaking, the legislators that have been aligned with Citizens for Liberty have been the most ineffective that we've seen in a long time. And so, what would you say to citizens of District 30 as to, would you follow along that line of their opinions and reasonings and tactics?
I'm gonna follow the Constitution. So, though I have people that I know that are in Citizens for Liberty, I myself am not a member of Citizens for Liberty. Okay? So, their politics, you say they're ineffective. You can say that about Julie Framuller, you can say that against, other people that are in that mindset of a Tea Party mindset. But when I said, okay, so you got your first bill passed, finally?
No, in my very first year I passed.
Oh, your very
a bill
first
on
one, okay.
marijuana. It was the only one to date that has been
Right.
passed on marijuana.
So, I know it's not reciprocal on some aspects with some legislators. So, I know the people that you speak of, when they are in the legislature, they're not looking at the people's names at the top of the bills and saying, well, I'll pass that, but I'm not gonna pass that one. Oh, I'm not gonna go with this, I'm not gonna go with that. There were some really good bills that Freimuller put in that I thought, dang, they ought to get passed. They ought to go through committee. These are really conservative bills. Any conservative would want that. And yet, they never got through committee. Is that because of her name's on the top of the bill? You had mentioned that in the speech that you said, it's because of her name's just on top of the bill. What? That's a problem. If your name's at the top of the bill and you don't think that, or let's say even put out the boogeyman, Lee Schoenbeck. He writes a bill, he's not gonna be in their next term, but let's say he's at the top of the bill, and I don't much care for his politics. Am I gonna look at his name to determine whether or not I like the bill or not, or am I gonna read the bill? I'm gonna read the bill. But I think too often that the people that you're saying that are ineffective, that are in there, is because of their politics and their names and what they stand for, rather than just looking at the merit of the bill itself. They can't allow those people to look good, because if they do, then they might garner more support, get more freedom. And then, dear God, we might actually have less of a jackboot of government on our neck, possibly. If the bill really does suck, then you shouldn't pass it. But if the bill is good, give it merit, then let it go. At least take it to the floor and see if it passes. But when you keep on shooting it down, there's an inherent problem. There's a problem in peer, and that evidence right there is why, one of the reasons why I'm running. Because not so, you think that if I can't get along, if it's just gonna be me doing the same old, everything that I do is going to be based upon the Constitution. And the state constitution, obviously. I've got to filter it through that. I don't have any other desires to make other people look bad. They can do that on themselves. Where the people are.
But you
Yeah.
can just characterize the South Dakota government as being jackbooted.
Mm-hmm.
Could you?
Yeah, that's government.
Could you
That's
be
an
more
inherent problem with government in itself, whether it be
Could you
the
be
U.S.
more specific of how they're jackbooted? Against
How they're
citizens?
jackbooting American citizens?
South Dakota citizens.
Well, South Dakota citizens. Yeah. But SB 201, do you agree with it? Do you know what it is? The Summit
I'm
Carbon
aware of
Solutions.
201.
Do you agree with it?
75% of people
You,
have signed
you wanna
on.
debate 201, we can debate 201. Counties were inflicting 1 mile setbacks from pipelines that people have already signed agreements. That's a taking of a mile of my property that now I have to go to the county to get a permit for. So you should realize why 201 was good and why it was bad. If you wanna debate 201, we can do that.
Yeah.
So who's the bigger taker? The county's taking a mile of my rights, or a pipeline taking a 100-foot corridor?
Well,
You have
number
to make
one.
choices.
Okay, so are the Summit,
75
And how many of the,
Are the Summit Carbon
how many of the
Solutions?
22 agricultural groups did not
Let's let
support
Matt,
201?
let's let Matt answer the question. He was asked a question.
Is Summit Carbon Solutions, okay, is that a public utility?
That wasn't in the bill.
Is it a public utility?
That's a
Then
determination.
why is it going to the,
By
then why is it
the
going to the
interstate
PUC?
transmission.
Then why is it going to the PUC?
Because it's interstate transmission.
Okay, so should counties be allowed to be able to make those laws themselves of what
Which
happens in their
laws?
county?
Which, on an international.
Because it's taking it's gonna take their laws away, their rights away.
75 people signed on to the thing.
How is that?
They're getting like
Because the PUC gets the final say over the counties.
The counties.
The thing it is that if it's not a public utility, it's an egregious act of taking land over the people's rights, and eminent domain is not meant for something, so you can argue all you want to, because it's come down to eminent domain.
Very, very good, I agree. It's an
Okay.
eminent domain discussion.
Correct, it certainly is. And so the thing of it is, you gotta look at what that is. Is it a public utility? If it's good for everybody, then fine. But when they're gonna take that, pump it into the ground, and take it back out and use it for jet fuel, I got a problem for that. I got a problem with people that are inside of our own government who are tied to ethanol, who are passing this, when I have Lee Schoenbach saying, you better move this thing or you're not gonna like the bills that we pass next time. And he's texting Josh Hader, looking like a drunk text. Yeah, I got a problem with that.
But 75% of people have signed on to it. I come from a family, I'm from.
Are those
Vermillion.
75% of the people, are they the ones that are living on the property?
Yes, can I say something? I'm from Vermillion, South Dakota, and so we have all corn and soybeans down there, really close to Iowa and Nebraska. My family want to be able to have this available to them because they grow corn, and with the price of fuel and fertilizer, they're not making as much money on their crops as they used to. So there are a lot of farmers that are really for this, and they said that they don't believe in a lot of this opposition to 201, and they think there's something else behind it other than what, people are stating.
Well, you can suppose that, but do you know that's the case?
I'll
Do you know
have
that's
Matt
the
wrap
truth?
up, 30
Yeah.
seconds to kind of wrap
Yeah,
up, give
and,
his
you
final
know,
statement, and then we'll have to.
I'll leave it there, but there are a lot of people that are in favor of it too.
I'm just gonna say, I love property rights, think they're super important. I think that this whole debacle is a perfect example of why we should play offense and not defense and have better, analyzation of our laws and have a couple attorneys up there to look at how statutes are being read. The statute that's in question about eminent domain in our state was written way back in the day for railroads when our state was developing and we needed eminent domain. It's being interpreted in ways that, no one knew back then there was even such thing as a CO2 pipeline because it didn't exist. And your question to effectiveness, that's why I'm running. I think that, you heard me say it earlier, it sucks that the situation is in District 30 that our current state senator, if her name's on something, people run away from it. And whether or not I agree with how we've gotten there, that's where we're at. And I want to actually pass a bill. I want to, bring relief in taxation to the people of our area, get funding for our law enforcement, fix some roads and bridges and dams that need to be fixed. Basic things. Not running because somebody asked me to run. Not running because I was recruited. I came home during such a time as this moment because our area was voiceless and was back when I was a kid and still is now. And it's terrifying and sad that 20,000 people don't have a voice right now and can't call a legislator to get them a bill passed when they need it. And that's not how our system of government should work. And I disagree with the politics of the situation in Pierre and how our current senator is treated. But the reality of the situation is that it's probably not going to change unless somebody else is sitting in that seat. That's why I'm running.
Matt, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, sure. I think that anybody, going to your point as well, because that's where it's coming down to, is that's a difference of personality on many of these things. Pure is an ugly place. Everybody that I know that works there doesn't go for the legislature. It's a grueling place. I don't know if you say that, but.
I would say that. Everyone in the legislature tries to do their very best.
Mhm.
And I think no matter what, we have to learn to get along with each other. And that's how you pass bills, is you have to be able to get along with people. But I think every legislator that we know tries their very best. And they go to work every day, drafting bills, voting on bills. Absolutely, every
Do
single
you
person.
think the high mark
tries
of
their
a
best.
legislator is to pass bills?
To pass bills?
for the people to get stuff done
Water.
if the
Yeah.
businesses
Do you think-
need it, yeah.
Yeah,
Is it?
I
that's
think
high
you have a
margin?
dual role, it's just as high to kill the bad guys.
Exactly.
but
Okay,
it's the same
thank you.
thing.
Yeah, I
That's your
agree.
point too, yeah.
You gotta be able to kill the bad bills, and you gotta get good bills passed. We gotta look at the bills and make sure that we're not crossing over, right? But when you got a bill like comes, we gotta fix the bridge, right? Okay, great. There are plenty of things that we have, our infrastructure, you know, in a lot of places just sucks because we're the rural nature of our state. You know, so I'll just say it like this. Pure, like any other political beast, has good and bad. But I don't believe that the high water mark of a legislator is passing bills. I think it's putting down the bad bills and looking at it constitutionally to make sure that the bills that we're passing aren't gonna be hurting our constituents. I don't want the bills to hurt those constituents. We may have I've been around to a lot of town meetings, oh my gosh. There's people that need water in certain towns, and they're not getting the water. And they don't have the money to, they don't have the money to do it. So water is something that we need to live. So, you know, that seems like it takes priority. But are they mismanaging their funds? We gotta look at that. We gotta see, you know, in some instances, they were questioned. They don't know where the money's going.
I stood on appropriations for 2 years, and believe me, everyone on appropriations works really hard and does it very fast. And honestly, in.
No, I'm talking about the towns.
Oh,
Inside
okay.
their towns.
Oh, okay.
But some of these are mismanaged towns, because the people that are in there have been put in because no one else would run. And so they don't know how to run their town. They never had anybody come alongside them and help them and teach them to do that. They're just in there. And it's just degrading and degrading and degrading. So.
Well, once again, I appreciate both of you guys coming.
Yeah.
I think they both deserve a round of applause. And then, like I said, next Wednesday,